Hello everybody, welcome to the studio. Hopefully you're all having amazing creative days. So today I'm going to talk to you about buying used lenses. So I've been a photographer for 20 plus years. I've bought a lot of used lenses over the years. And in this video, I'm going to share my knowledge and my experience with you guys in case you're looking to buy used lenses because hey, why not buy a used lens and save a little bit of money? So I'm going to go over the 3 different types of places you can buy used lenses. I'm going to go over the red flags to look for when buying used lenses. And I'm going to give you my 7-point inspection process when buying a used lens, the 7 things that I definitely 100% look for when I'm buying a used lens. And of course, this is a channel for the community for photographers. So if you're buying used lenses or you have experience buying used lenses and there's something that you put in your red flag list or your inspection process that I didn't mention in this video, definitely leave that down in the comments. And I'm sure the people who watch this video will read the comments and, let's share knowledge and information and, get better at this process of buying used lenses. All right, so with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I want to touch on is there's 3 types of places to buy used lenses. So first of all, we have like businesses that sell used lenses. That's what they specialize in. They buy used lenses and they sell used lenses. Then we have places like Facebook Marketplace where you're buying lenses from individuals. And then we have places like eBay, which is a mix of individuals and businesses. So let's go through all 3 of those and talk about the pros and cons of buying lenses from each one of those. All right, number 1, buying your lenses from a camera business. So it could be your local camera shop. Sometimes they take trade-ins. Someone wants to upgrade some gear. They sell the old gear, buy new gear, and that camera shop will sell the old gear. Or there's websites like KEH.com or MPB.com. I've used KEH several times to buy lenses. So far, so good. I've had one issue where they didn't put the right paperwork in the box and had to deal with customs and stuff like that. But that's a story for another video. But yeah, so you can buy lenses from a business. Now, the positives and negatives. The negatives are prices can be a little bit higher because businesses have to make money. So they're going to acquire that used gear, then they're going to mark it up and then resell it at a profit. So they got to make money. That's the whole name of the game when it comes to business. The positives are that these lenses are usually checked and inspected. So if you're going to KEH.com, they have a whole ranking system. The lens is in excellent condition, fair, poor, bad, all that stuff. So if you're new to buying lenses, used lenses, you can rest assured knowing that these companies are going to go through the lenses and test them for you before selling them so you know what you're getting into. And the other major positive with these online businesses is they usually take returns and refunds. So you buy the lens, if there's something wrong with it, you can send it back for repair or get a money back kind of thing. So that's definitely a positive. Okay, so let's talk about number 2, buying lenses from individuals. And this is probably the most fun and exciting way to buy lenses, but also the most risky, but also the most rewarding. So let's say you have a friend of a friend who's a photographer, wants to unload some gear. You can go meet up with them and buy some gear, or Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, things like that. People will list lenses and try and sell them. And there's positives and negatives. So the negative could be that you get stuck with a lemon. You could go buy a lens, you bring it home, it doesn't work. And because you paid cash and paid for it somewhere at a coffee shop, like getting a return or getting your money back is next to impossible. So you really have to know what red flags to look for in a lens before you purchase one, especially if you're buying from an individual, right? So that's something to worry about. Also, some people put the prices way high and they're just trying to look for some kind of sucker to say, oh, I really want that lens, I'm going to buy it, but they don't do their research and look for that lens's actual value, right? That could be a thing. But also on the positive side, sometimes people inherit lenses or get lenses and they don't know the value and they're just throwing them up on Facebook Marketplace and you find great deals. Like I found a great deal on a Zenitar fisheye vintage lens. It's worth $300 to $400 USD, and the person had a Sony A-mount adapter on the back of the lens, and they didn't realize it was an adapter that could come off, right? So they were selling it for $50, and nobody wanted it. And I said, Sony never made vintage lenses. So I bought the lens, took off the adapter, and there you go. Now I have a nice M42 adapter on this vintage lens worth a lot more than what I paid for it. So you can find really nice deals on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and that kind of thing. So yeah, the negatives are, you could get scammed, you could buy a lemon, prices could be too high, but on the positive side, if you know what you're looking for, lenses, you can find really nice deals, really cheap deals. But obviously, the big thing from buying with individuals is buyer beware. Make sure you know what the red flags are that you're looking for, and we're going to talk about those later in the video. So now let's move on to the third way you can buy lenses. And it's not really a third way, it's kind of a mishmash of 1 and 2, but I put it in its own category, and that is eBay, because You have businesses on eBay and you have individuals on eBay. But unlike buying lenses from individuals where you can go and actually inspect the lens and hold it in your hands, on eBay, you rely on photos, right? So it's all kind of businessy, internet-y kind of thing. And eBay is also another fantastic place to buy lenses. Again, make sure, this is the big red flag with eBay, right? Make sure you read the listing, because sometimes the listing says, you know, this lens autofocus doesn't work. This is for parts only, sold as is, no refunds. So make sure you read the listing before you buy. And I know people who bought lenses and they're like, oh yeah, this is great, and it doesn't work. And then they try and refund it. And it's just like, well, you know, the listing said this is for parts only. It's not going to work and you don't get your money back. But in general, eBay is pretty good at refunding you, especially if the seller isn't totally 100% accurate with their description. Like recently I bought an 80 to 200 L lens, an old FD vintage lens, and the description said this lens was clean, no fungus, no problems. I got the lens, I tested it out. Images were soft, so I took a flashlight and I shined it inside the lens, and it looked like snowflakes. There was so much mold in there, so I had to return it, and eBay gave me my money back right away because the lens that I got didn't match the description. So that's a good thing for sure. But yeah, with eBay, you can find prices all over the place. Generally, prices tend to be a little bit higher on eBay because you're paying shipping. And if you live outside of the country that the person is shipping the lens from, you have import duties, right? So you may think you're buying a lens at this price, and then with shipping and import duties, you're actually paying this price. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're buying on eBay. You may think you're getting a good deal, but you're not. But in any case, it all comes down to the lens and the lens's value to you. If you're using the lens to make money and you pay an extra, you know, 20 bucks, 50 bucks, 100 bucks, 200 bucks for import duties and shipping and stuff, so what? You got clients, the clients pay for that in the end. It pays itself off. You end up saving whatever it is that you're saving on not buying the lens brand new, right? So those are the 3 ways you can buy used lenses. All right, so now let's talk about my 7-point inspection process when buying used lenses, and this will also include the red flags to look for. Here they are on the screen. You can pause the screen, write these down for yourself, or you can check the link in the description, go to the blog. I'll have these listed out on the blog with more of a write-up, so if you're a better learner from reading, then definitely check out the blog. If you're more auditory and visual, then stay on the video. But yeah, so these are the 7 things that I look for or try and inspect for when I buy a used lens. And so far, I've bought a ton of lenses used, and I haven't had any issues. And when I do have issues, you know, I've been able to return the lenses. So yeah, let's talk about these. All right, number 1, research your lens. Be armed with knowledge before you go and make your decision on buying the lens. There's an old saying that says, chance favors the prepared mind. So prepare your mind, research your lens, because lenses are quirky. Like, for example, the EF 24 to 70 millimeter, the old lens, the earlier serial number models of that lens were soft. The later serial numbers were sharp. So, you know, you have to know where that delineation is in those serial numbers. If you're buying that older version of the lens, you're like, this is going to be the soft one. I'm going to pass. I'm going to go find a sharper one, right? And all sorts of lenses have different issues. So definitely research the lens you want to buy. Find out what the common issues with the lens are. So when you go to make that purchase, you can check for those issues. All right, number 2, ask questions. So, you know, sometimes with like online stuff, you can only message and you can ask them to send you some more photos. You know, can you send me a photo of the aperture? Can you send me a photo of the lens elements? Can you shine a flashlight through the lens elements so I can see if there's dust or specks or scratches, stuff like that? In person, definitely ask questions. So you want to know about the history of the lens, like how long have you had it? Did you buy it new? Did you buy it used? You know, why are you selling it? Does it make funny noises when it autofocuses? So you're trying to gauge the history of the lens and just understand the lens, but you're also trying to understand the buyer. So you can, if you have any kind of like weird intuitive feelings about like, I don't know, this person doesn't seem like they really are the owner of the lens, because there are people out there who sell stolen stuff. You can ask a BS question like, you know, how does the linear motor sound when you use the rear front button autofocus from shooting people at a distance? Does it make that weird click click sound? Or, you know, obviously any photographer is going to know that's a complete BS question, but if it's somebody selling stolen goods, they're going to try and BS the answer. And then you know, like, okay, this person doesn't really know the history of the lens. It's probably not their lens. And then you have to determine whether or not you're willing to take the risk on buying a lens because you don't know where it came from. But yeah, so definitely ask questions. All right, so now we're moving on to the physical inspection of the lens. So the first thing you want to test out are the lens elements, and this is the most important part of the lens. Like if the outside of the lens is damaged, you can fix that. You know, if the autofocus is kind of stuck, or the aperture blades, the oil on the aperture blades is seized up the aperture blades or something like that, that all can be fixed, but you cannot fix the lens elements. So that's the glass on the lens. So check that first. That's number one. So if the lens elements are damaged, just walk away and be like, no, I'm not buying this. So what you're looking for is scratches, mold, dust, kind of like peeling or separation, anything that shouldn't be there. You want your lens elements to be as clean as possible. So bring a flashlight. You can shine the flashlight in through the back of the lens and you can check for dust. Now, used lenses probably have dust in them. That's just par for the course. If you're buying vintage, they definitely have dust in there. So that's par for the course as well. Scratches, that's an iffy thing, right? If you're shooting backlit, so the light is in front of your subject or behind your subject matter, then you have your subject matter, then the camera. If you have any kind of little scratches on the lens, that light coming into the lens will hit that scratch and diffract in different ways and create lens flares. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't like that. It's up to you, it's your call. The other thing you gotta look for is mold. Now, it doesn't really happen much in modern autofocus lenses, but if you're dealing with like older vintage lenses, they can develop mold if they're not cared for properly. And a little bit of mold isn't a big deal. You can open up the lens, take out the elements, clean them, put the lens back together. It takes a certain amount of like technical know-how to do that, and it's kind of fun to do, or you can pay someone to do it. I think it's between $80 to $200 to have someone clean your lens. So it's up to you if you want to take that risk or, take on that endeavor, that challenge. The other thing to worry about is like heavy mold, because lenses obviously have coatings on them. And sometimes if the mold kind of grows, those tendrils or roots or whatever, that gets into the lens coating and eats away at the lens coating. So even if you remove the mold, the coatings on that lens are damaged. So that's something to keep in mind. If you see that kind of thing, you might see like weird lines from mold that was removed, but the lens looks clean, but you can see that the coatings are damaged. And again, this is more common with vintage lenses than modern lenses, but it's something to keep an eye out for. And here's the thing, when you buy vintage lenses, you're buying them because they have character. You're not buying them because they're ultra sharp like modern lenses. Like if you want a modern lens, buy a modern lens, right? So sometimes those imperfections in vintage lenses give them character, but whether or not you're willing to pay for that or deal with that is up to you. So there you go, inspect the elements first. All right, and the next thing you want to test on the lens are the rings. You have an aperture ring, you have a focus ring, you could have a zoom ring, or you could have some sort of programmable ring like on Canon RF glass. So definitely check those out. I would recommend bringing your camera body with you, attaching it to the lens, and then check the focus, check the aperture, check all the other rings on the lens if they're applicable, and make sure it works. When you're focusing or zooming, make sure there isn't any kind of weird like scratching sound. Sometimes sand or mud gets in the lenses, and then when you don't want to buy that. You don't want to deal with that. But yeah, if you're buying vintage lenses, definitely make sure the focus ring works and the aperture rings. A big problem with vintage lenses is sometimes the oil or the grease on the aperture blades gets hard, so then the aperture kind of seizes up. It's fixable, but it's just something to be aware of. And also with certain vintage lenses, they have a little pin on the back. Unless that pin is actuated, the aperture won't turn. So make sure you bring your adapter so you can attach the adapter to the lens and then make sure the aperture works. Sometimes with vintage lenses, like it's not necessarily a big deal if the aperture doesn't work because you want the bokeh or that look, so you shoot wide open anyway. But again, that's your call, your choice, your money. So make sure you check the rings after you inspect the elements. All right, next thing to look at is the front filter thread. A lot of people, they bend over with the camera like hanging around their neck and they bash the lenses into a table, into a drawer, into a chair. And if those front filter threads are bent, you can't attach filters to the lens. So maybe that's a big deal for you, maybe it's not. I don't know. I like shooting with filters, so I'm using like ND filters, variable ND filters, polarizer filters, mist filters. So I like filters, and if those threads are bent, I can't use filters, so I will pass on the lens. But of course, that's your call. All right, so we're on to the last two, and the first of those is buttons and switches. So if the lens has any kind of buttons and switches, mount the lens onto your camera and test them out. So let's say autofocus, manual focus, lens IS on, off, or any kind of specialty buttons or switches, that kind of thing. Make sure you test it before you buy the lens. And of course, if you did step one and you've researched, hey, this button is sticky on the lens or this button sometimes breaks, now you know, you're armed with that knowledge, so you can test out that button and 100% make sure it works. And the last thing you want to inspect on the lens is just the outside condition, the barrel. Like okay, if the barrel is a little bit scratched or, something's off or whatever, who cares? It doesn't matter as long as the lens works, because that's ultimately what really matters. So, if the outside is scratched up, maybe you can negotiate a lower price. Like, I didn't really think that this lens kind of looks a little, and let's say they're selling it for $500 and you want to buy it for $450, right? So you say a counter offer, you start at $400, then they go $475, and you say, $450, maybe they'll drop to $425, but whatever you want to pay for the lens, always start below that number and then negotiate up, and they'll negotiate down. That's how negotiation works. So yeah, that's the 7-point inspection process. And now I'm going to give you a little bit of a pro tip if you have a photography business and you're buying used lenses. All right, so here's a pro tip for my fellow photography business owners. So if you run a photography business and you charge your clients tax and you collect that tax and you pay the government that tax, then this is for you. So let's say, okay, this is an RF 15 to 35. Let's say arbitrarily it costs $2,500 brand new in store plus tax. And you go on Facebook Marketplace and you might see somebody selling it for $2,400 all in. Should you buy it? You save $100 plus the tax on the lens if you buy it on Facebook Marketplace. But is it a good buy? Is it actually going to save you more money than buying it in store with tax? So here's the thing. If you buy this in store with tax, number one, you get the warranty, you pay the tax, you get a receipt. And then at the end of the year, when you do your taxes, you take the taxes you pay on the lens and you take that away from what you owe in taxes. So it's a business expense. Plus, lenses depreciate over time and you can write off that depreciation against what you owe in taxes as well. So if you pay full price for this lens in store, you're probably going to end up saving more money by writing it off as depreciation and taxes over time than to save $100 buying it on Facebook Marketplace. So just something to consider. Like, if your business is small and you're not really paying taxes at this point, save the $100 buying on Facebook Marketplace. But if you're a pro and you got a good income coming in and you're paying your taxes, then you can write this off as a business expense. Just something to think about. And speaking of 15 to 35, let's end the video with the 15 to 35 and get nice and wide. Okay, so if you buy used lenses and there's something in your process that I didn't mention in this video and you want to share it with the community, leave it in the comments down below. I'm sure people would really appreciate the knowledge. And if you did learn something and you want to say thank you, leave it in the comments below. Every comment really helps grow the channel. Social interaction is definitely a good thing and I would totally appreciate it. Trying to get to 50,000 subscribers. So if you want to help me out, definitely hit the subscribe button. And yeah, on this channel, we talk about photography stuff. So anything to do with photo shoots, lenses, cameras, lights, light modifiers, photo shoots, that kind of thing. That's what this channel is all about. So yeah, subscribe if that's what you're into. And with that being said, thank you for watching all the way to the end. I totally appreciate it. That is awesome. And I will see you guys in the next video where we talk more photography stuff. Peace out.